We're spending services on First Sundays exploring each of the values that are named in the proposed covenant for our Unitarian Universalist Association. This is an exciting time for our faith, as amendments to the proposal are collected and debated, culminating in next month's UUA General Assembly. Remember that the business sessions and worship services at GA are all streamed live and for free on the UUA website and YouTube. And you can look for updates from Joanne and me and your delegates while we're in Pittsburgh too. In the new UUA covenant that's been proposed, 7 values are identified as shared by most Unitarian Universalists. Marcy, would you put the flower of values on the screen, please? Thank you. These values are arranged in no particular order, except that love is placed at the center, given that it has consistently been identified as the foundational value of our faith. And that's what we talked about in February. Then in March, when we were also running our canvas, we talked about generosity. Last month, since that was Palm Sunday and April's theme was resistance, we talked about justice. And today, with May's theme being creativity, we're talking about transformation. Thank you, Marcy. You can stop sharing. Here's what the Article 2 Study Commission has drafted for the transformation part of our UUA covenant. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Certainly, if you look at the story of our faith tradition, you'll see that it's a story of transformation. Both the Unitarians and the Universalists transformed theology, preaching a fully human Jesus and salvation for everyone, respectively. They transformed social institutions, fighting for the abolition of slavery, for women's suffrage, for prison reform, for children's education. Then they transformed theology again, taking theism beyond Christianity, then taking faith beyond theism, and imagining a truly universal religion. And the work to transform society continued for racial justice, for reproductive rights, for marriage equality, for peace, for the earth. The Reformation wasn't just something that happened in the 16th century. For Unitarian Universalists, it started long before that, and it continues today. So let's talk about adaptation and growth, the UU Reformation that is never complete and never perfect, and our intention to be open to change, as difficult as that can sometimes be. I saw something recently that said, it's not your beliefs that make you a free thinker. It's your ability to change your beliefs based on new information that makes you a free thinker. And isn't that convicting? It's not your beliefs that make you a free thinker. It's your ability to change your beliefs based on new information that makes you a free thinker. Writer Anais Nin put it even more starkly. Life is a process of becoming, she said, a combination of states we have to go through. Where people fail is that they wish to elect a state and remain in it. This, Nin declared, is a kind of death. Let me give you a real-life example of this. 450 years ago, there was a Unitarian king. His name was John Sigismund Zapolya, and he was the king of Hungary in the province of Transylvania that is now part of Romania. With the Protestant Reformation underway in Europe and guided by both his physician, Giorgio Biandrata, and the court preacher, Ferenc David, John organized a series of theological debates in the 1560s. Informed by those debates, the king converted first from Catholicism to Lutheranism in 1562, and then from Lutheranism to Calvinism in 1564. And in 1568, John issued the Edict of Torda, giving religious freedom to Catholic, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Unitarian churches. And he himself converted to Unitarianism when his preacher David won a debate against a Trinitarian. What a story, right? How great is it that we had a Unitarian king? And we can boast that we were part of the first act of religious freedom in the Western world, and as far back as the 16th century, no less. Of course, that's the good part of the story. What happened next wasn't so great. In 1570, a long-standing conflict with the Habsburgs of Austria was resolved on the condition that John renounce his claim to the Hungarian throne, taking the title Prince of Transylvania instead. Having been ill for much of his short life, John died the following year, and the Transylvanians elected István Báthory, who was Catholic, to succeed him. Báthory tried to undermine the Edict of Torda, which otherwise remained in effect, and subsequently issued a new decree that prohibited any further religious innovation. In other words, there was still official recognition of the Catholic, Lutheran, Calvinist, and Unitarian churches, and nobody could be forced to convert from one to another, but that was it. No more theological debates, no more new ideas. Well, guess which one of those four denominations was still wanting to entertain some new ideas? Prince David had been King John's court preacher, remember, and he himself had charted the religious journey on which he had led John. David is, in fact, the only person to have ever been raised Catholic, ordained a Catholic priest, converted to Lutheranism, made a Lutheran bishop, converted to Calvinism, elected a Calvinist bishop, and finally converted to Unitarianism. In doing so, David was certainly influenced by John's physician, Giorgio Biandrata, who was born in Italy, argued with John Calvin in Geneva, and unlike Michael Servetus, survived, and became a Unitarian in Poland before finding his way to Transylvania. David and Biandrata collaborated on theological matters and even wrote a book together, The False and True Knowledge of God. But after John's death and Báthory's prohibition of religious innovation, they had a falling out. Biandrata continued as Báthory's physician and was content to live within the new restrictions in order, so he thought, to protect Unitarianism and preserve it for the future. David was no longer court preacher, of course, but with his congregation, he was raising religious questions, particularly about the relationship of Unitarianism to the rest of Christianity. Biandrata asked David to stop it, but he didn't. Biandrata even brought in the influential leader of the Polish Unitarians to try to convince David of the error of his ways, but that didn't work either. Biandrata accused David of breaking an agreement, and after that there was only animosity between them. When Báthory put David on trial for religious innovation, Biandrata led the prosecution. David was quite sick. The conviction was a foregone conclusion, and he was sentenced to life in prison. David died a few months later. This is sadly a common pattern in religion. Some people are happy to change, to reform, to transform up to a point, and then they decide to stay where they are, which includes stopping anybody else from ever changing, reforming, transforming any further. Now, a lot of UUs would say that we're free thinkers, and that's not just our own fancy. It's built into Unitarian Universalism. In fact, one of the defining features of liberal religion, the first of the 5 smooth stones described by UU theologian James Luther Adams, is that, quote, revelation is continuously revealed, meaning has not been fully captured, and the book of truth has not been closed. In other words, there's always more to learn, always more to realize, always more to understand. Revelation is not sealed, and that calls us to adapt and change. As Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. This is addressed in the part of our current UUA Covenant known as the 6 sources. Our 6th source is named as humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. Idolatry is the veneration of a fixed image of the divine rather than the divine itself. So our 6th source reminds us not to get too attached to particular ideas, understandings, or even language, because they can and do change over time. Speaking of the dangers of attachment, our 3rd source names wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life. The great teaching of one of those world religions, Buddhism, is that suffering is a consequence of clinging to the temporary, the impermanent, the changeable. What's more, we go so far as to call Unitarian Universalism a living tradition. This means we recognize that who we are and how we understand the world, each other, and ourselves is always changing. None of us are frozen in time, nor is our society or our knowledge or our hopes. Hopefully our wisdom is growing too, our compassion, our sense of justice. So neither we nor our religion can stay stuck in some arbitrary time past. Rather, we must always be adapting, changing, growing, and transforming. I'm going to ask you some wondering questions now, and I'll give you a little time after each one to reflect. Marcy, please put each question on the screen as I read it. I wonder how you have changed since you first came here. I wonder how you have adapted to our changing world. I wonder when you have resisted a change you had to make. I wonder when you have learned or realized something that inspired you to transformation. For the first meeting of the Earth Justice team last week, I was digging out the information I had collected about our previous Green Sanctuary efforts, and I was aghast to discover that many years ago I had printed out an entire chunk of the UUA website. That was not a very green thing to do. So this morning, since we're talking about transformation, I'm giving each of you one page of that printout. Should be under your chair if you haven't already picked it up. And I'm asking what you can make out of it. Reusing is better than recycling, though you can still recycle it after the service. After you've had a few minutes to work on transforming your piece of paper into whatever you want to turn it into, Lucy will invite us into a time of sharing. And in case you need some ideas, Marcy will now play a short video for us.
Johnny, what do you make out of this?
This? Well, I could make a cap, or a brooch, a pterodactyl.
Change can be scary, but as our opening hymn today told us, don't be afraid of some change. With or without our consent, change will happen. We can choose to resist it or to embrace it, but change will happen either way. And whether or not we suffer because of it is up to us. And so the Article 2 Study Commission has proposed as a named UU value, transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Now, an early draft of the proposal named this evolution. I wasn't too keen on that name for it and immediately thought that transformation would be better. But I can understand why the Commission chose it. In biology, of course, evolution is a process of change in response to environmental pressures, with organisms passing on certain traits to their offspring based on whether or not those traits help them live long enough to actually have offspring. More generally, we think of evolution as a change over time, an unfolding of potential for improvement. As UU Minister Marilyn Sewell put it, we believe in evolution, not only evolution of life forms, but evolution of thought and evolution of moral and ethical understanding. So the truth that I embrace today may not be the truth I embrace tomorrow. Revelation is not static, but it is ever unfolding. More and more will be revealed. However, there is a popular sense that evolution takes place and is directed toward some higher goal, which is the old and excessively optimistic Unitarian expectation of progress, onward and upward forever. So I'm glad that in the later draft, the Commission went with transformation instead. After all, a caterpillar doesn't evolve into a butterfly, it transforms. Our faith calls us to be agents of transformation, to help unfold the potential for improvement within ourselves, within our walls, and within our society as we work to realize the beloved community together. Last month, for instance, a number of us gathered with other partners at St. John's Church of God in Christ for a demonstration by Raw Tools, a ministry based in Philadelphia that forges guns into gardening tools, literally following the prophetic imperative of Isaiah 2:4 to beat swords into plowshares. The UFP was very well attended there. So thank you to those of you who attended, and a big thank you to Mason Mosley for helping to organize the event. So we're going to close with a short video created by Anne Kunze about the work of transformation in which we participated that day. Marcy, please play Anne's video for us. May our work to transform ourselves and our world continue.